Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And in today's episode, we got to cool it with all of the discourse with the Philadelphia Phillies lineup. I'll tell you why.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure that you're rating and reviewing if you're listening to us in podcast form. If you're checking us out on the YouTube, go to the Locked On Phillies YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button. It gets you notifications when new episodes are posted. It'll be right there on your home screen when you open the YouTube app, and it'll get you the opportunity to just make sure you're keeping up with everything. It's free. It's easy, and it also really helps me out here on Locked On Phillies. It's a good validation of the work we're doing and making sure it's what you're wanting to hear. So appreciate everyone who's done that and everyone who's going to do that. Today, we're jumping into a conversation about the lineup discourse. There's been a lot of it. So we're going to lead off with that. Lead off, no pun intended. Then we're also going to talk about debunking a statistic floating around that also has to do with the lineup. But this one I want to spend a little bit more extra time on and dive a little bit deeper into, because it's a very, very interesting conversation about the three-hole and Bryce Harper, because a lot of this now centers around Bryce Harper somehow, when the conversation just a week or two ago was about Kyle Schwarber or Trey Turner batting leadoff and who's best for that. And speaking of Kyle Schwarber, we're going to talk about him in the final segment, but not about where he's batting in the lineup, about his position in today's spring training game. He's playing first. We'll break that down as well. But I just gotta sometimes, and this is not me trying to be like high and mighty. Oh, I have a podcast, so you all should listen to every last word I say. That's not it at all. That's not how I ever mean to present this. But sometimes I do think that I need to save parts of the fan base from themselves. People get all caught up and worried on things that sometimes you just obsess over. Sometimes you feel like it matters more than it actually does. And I'm only giving my opinion, but it's an opinion of years and years of watching baseball, talking about it, being a credentialed media member for this team. The discourse about the lineup on February 27th of February, a month until opening day, by the way. That's awesome to have. 1 month until the Phillies will take the field in Washington for their first regular season game. I'm excited. We're getting close, folks, to meaningful baseball. It's good to just have any baseball back, but with a month still to go till you actually put the lineup together, and with 8 of the 9 guys that are going to be in your opening day lineup being guys that were on the team in a starting role last year, it's exhausting to debate back and forth. Well, who bats first, who bats second, who bats third? And I understand part of the conversation. We've had it on this podcast, but the other level of it that it drives me insane is the people who look at a lineup day to day in spring training and say, this is something that they're going to try and do here. This is a sign of what they are trying to do there. Every once in a while, you might say, okay, well, this is something that they tried. Could this be a trend going forward? But to every lineup to take it by word, here's just something you need to know, right? And the top 4 in lineups now, top 5 in lineups now are seeing some major league players in there and stuff like that. Guys like Trey Turner, Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, JT Realmuto, and stuff like that. You'll see names you recognize. But, for example, Bryce Harper was hit by a pitch against the Toronto Blue Jays. It was a road game. And part of the conversation around that was, well, see, this is why Bryce Harper doesn't normally play road games in spring training, because you get more young players playing at home, right? So the opposing team has more young pitchers going because it's a more comfortable environment. They don't want to send them on the road trips right away, give them too much to handle. Young pitchers, less polished, more wild, a chance for something crazy to happen, an injury to happen, right? It's a situation where it's better for some players to just say, hey, I'm only playing at home. I have that right as Bryce Harper, 2-time National League MVP. I'm the best player on this baseball team. I get to dictate a little bit of how I want to do this. But it's also just a reminder that there are certain guys that don't like playing road games. There are certain guys that I read an article from Matt Gelb in The Athletic about Justin Crawford and how there was a point in the Double-A season last year where he stepped away from Double-A baseball for just a day because his father, Carl Crawford, was being honored by the Rays. Guys have such an amount of leeway for personal stuff in spring training. There's a great story from Jeff Francoeur when he was with the Braves, and I forget who his manager was at the time, but he had an opportunity to play golf with Tiger Woods. Look up this story when you get a chance, because there's a video out there from a podcast. He's told it a couple times. He told it to us on air at 97.5 The Fanatic on the morning show that I'm a part of as well. But he had a chance to play golf with Tiger Woods. He had a game that day. He worked it out with his manager, run down to first, and act like you tweaked something, and we'll pull you out of the game. And that's what he did. He faked an injury so he could go play golf with Tiger Woods. Like, spring training is such a country club atmosphere. And that's how it should be. These guys at the major league level are going to play 162 games in like 185 days. It's going to be wild, the amount of time that they have to put in on the baseball field this year. So this is more like easy does it, stretch out your body, take your time. And I say all this, you might say, Connor, what does this have to do with lineup discourse? There are dudes with days off for who knows what. And that changes the dynamic of what the lineup is. Until we get into like mid-March, it's probably presumptuous to look at a lineup and say, well, this is them showing something. Now, there are certain things that you look at as far as trends. Like one thing I brought up in the first lineup of spring training conversation, because you're always going to talk about the first one, is the fact that they alternated handedness. Now, you could see various trends like that they like, but where guys are batting as far as specific spots in the order, I would hesitate on going too deep into that. The other thing with the Philadelphia Phillies, that when everything's all said and done, like tweaks can make big differences. Minor changes to a lineup can make major differences to the dynamic of the team. But it's not that simple, right? These changes will happen over the course of a full season. And you may see the initial workings is the term that I want to use there, of these lineups in spring training, if you really read the tea leaves. But at the end of the day, you could try something in spring training and not work, and then try it in the regular season and not work, and then different, and then get back to the same thing and say, well, actually, that was better than all of these other options. Like, anyone who's worried about what the Phillies lineup is going to look like on opening day, the chances that lineup is the same come postseason is very, very slim. And that's due to injuries, and that's due to changes in the season, guys having better years, guys having lesser years. It's just very, very early to have conversations about, well, Rob Thompson needs to have this be his lineup. This guy has to hit here. There's no way that you can move this guy out of this spot. Like, one thing with the team that has come up short is everything is on the table, right? Everything is on the table with this lineup, especially when you don't make major changes with the actual roster. They're running it back in large part, the Philadelphia Phillies. So the way you shake things up is the lineup and the order they hit in. And that's something that I've talked about on this podcast. But you can't presume to know what the Philadelphia Phillies should be doing from the outside looking in, when the manager of the team doesn't know yet, when the president of baseball operations doesn't know yet, when the owner doesn't know yet, when the individual players don't know yet, when the hitting coach doesn't know. Like, there are plenty of guys in this organization that are still trying to work this out. So for us to think, oh, well, I have the answer, it's a step too far. If you'd have something that you'd like to see, that's well within your right. Absolutely. If you're like, I think I'd like to see Nick Castellanos bat sixth this year because he's going to see more fastballs at that spot, and it can create a little bit more of the power that he hasn't shown the same way since coming to Philadelphia. Great. You have a general idea of what you want to see. You have your preference. You have a little bit of a thought process to back it up. But anything past that, where it's like, this guy can't bat in this spot, is crazy. Another thing that we've seen the narrative start to build on is players saying where they want to bat. Like Kyle Schwarber, I would like batting leadoff, so the Phillies should bat me leadoff. Bryce Harper, I like batting third. I'm the 3-hole hitter for this team. Like, to some extent, you should listen to your players. And to some extent, the manager should dictate what they're going to do. It's his job to set the lineup. The lineup card is his. And the players are ultimately inclined to listen to the manager. But you're not coaching high school kids. You're not coaching college kids. You're not coaching robots who don't have a preference, where you can just put them wherever and they'll operate the same. Excuse me. You're in a situation where Bryce Harper knows a lot of baseball. JT Realmuto, Kyle Schwarber, Nick Castellanos, these guys all know a lot of baseball. The leaders of your team that have been doing this for a long time have their preferences based on what works. And it'd be dumb for the manager to not listen to them, at least in some extent. It would also be dumb for the players to not listen to their manager. It would be flat out disrespectful if Rob Thompson goes to Bryce Harper and he's like, dude, I want to try you batting second, for example. And we're going to talk about that coming up in our next segment. But if he wants to go out there and say, yo, bat second, Well, part of being a good player on a team and listening to your manager is saying, hey, if you really feel this way, I'm going to voice my displeasure. I like batting third. I don't want to bat second. But if ultimately the foot is put down, you got to listen. So it's a two-way street. And anyone who's saying like the players are dominating the conversation, I think that's too far. And if anyone's saying the manager's dominating the conversation, I think that's too far. And where it ultimately should fall is this collaborative effort of saying, okay, well, this guy likes to be here. I like him here. Let's see if we can work out a compromise. Let's see if we can find an upside in the spot that everyone's happy with. And if you can't, well, ultimately the manager gets the trump card. And Rob Thompson rarely has to use it because the Philadelphia Phillies have been an organization that has operated very, very well internally when it comes to working through these issues. I'm not talking about the results on the field. I'm saying the process of putting together a team and people being happy with the decisions being made has gone very, very well for the Philadelphia Phillies under Rob Thompson. And that's because he runs a locker room where guys feel like their voice is heard and guys are allowed to voice their opinions, talk to their teammates, work things out internally, and work from there. And that's I think, a really important structure to have for the sport of baseball, where you spend so much time with each other and you play so many games and it's such a long season. I think that's a good thing. So the lineup discourse that we're having this early is, I think, crazy. I remember when Joe Girardi was fired as manager of the Philadelphia Phillies. And I remember doing a show on the radio from a Chickies and Pete's. I forget where it was, but I remember sitting there at the desk and talking about the lineup issues and saying, well, like, you've just got a situation where Girardi's trying different stuff every single day. There's no consistency with the lineup. You want to sit these guys where they are and say, hey, go to bat for 2 weeks. Let's see what that is. Go to bat for a month. Let's see what that is. You have a talented team. Let them figure it out themselves. They're professional baseball players. You got to give them some consistency to help add that. He didn't do it. And you know when that was? That was in June. Like, we were having lineup conversations in June. This conversation is going to happen throughout the year. We don't need to solve it now. It's not the Da Vinci Code, so it can be solved sooner than that. But you have to leave yourself open to possibilities of things working, and pretending like we have the answer now is crazy. So my point to you, Phillies fans, who are looking at the lineup saying, I'd rather them do this, I'd rather them do that. They're going to try things. One of those is going to be Trey Turner at leadoff. They're going to see how that works out, and they're going to reevaluate. The Phillies are not a dumb organization. Have they not made it over the hump of winning a World Series? Totally fair. They have not. But are they a bad organization? No. Are they a stupid organization? No. Are they a failing organization? No. So leave a little trust out there on the table, even though they've been moving in the wrong direction in the postseason, while still improving in the regular season. And we'll see what this year has. Now, part of this lineup discourse has been centered around the leadoff position, the 2-hole, the 3-hole, and the cleanup spot, right? Those are the premier spots in a batting order, 1, 2, 3, and 4. If you can get those locked down, well, you have a great anchor to hold down your lineup, right? But the Phillies, well, it's kind of weird how that shakes out because there's a lot of different ways you could put together the top 4. I think we know the general players' names that are in the conversation for those spots. But an interesting statistic has been floated around that I've got to debunk because, to me, it makes no sense. And it's one of these analytics things that sometimes you got to know the truth behind the numbers rather than just using the numbers. So we'll talk about that stat coming up next that has to do with lineup positioning for the Philadelphia Phillies as they move within a month of their opening day game in Washington. All right, let me tell you about our friends over at Wonderful Pistachios. If you're looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious, you can crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1-ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better-for-you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Now, I've been telling you about this no shells version that they have, and I like it better because it's so much more convenient. You might say, Connor, you're just doing an ad read. You don't actually eat these. Well, take a look, folks, right in my hand. If you're not watching on YouTube, you can't see it. I got the no shells version of the Wonderful Pistachios, sea salt and vinegar flavored. Listen, these are awesome snacks, and they're great for you as well. I can't wait to crack into this fresh bag. The only reason I haven't opened it is because I know we were talking about Wonderful Pistachios on our ad schedule today. And I've been dying to crack into this new bag. I've had them before. I'll have them again after this, but I love Wonderful Pistachios. They're a great grab-and-go snack. They come in this little resealable package, too, if you're still watching. It's got the little zipper at the top that you can put it back together. Get snacking and get cracking with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. And honestly, take my word for it. It's a great snack to have for all occasions. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this statistic that's been floated out there, because one of the answers to the question about who's batting where in the Philadelphia Phillies lineup has been this interesting set of numbers. And this has been circulating on social media. It's become a calling card for a lot of people who want to make this argument that Bryce Harper should not be batting third. Now, Bryce Harper has batted third for pretty much his whole career. He has been a two-time National League MVP. He has been a darn good baseball player. He hit arguably the biggest home run in the history of the Philadelphia Phillies, one of the biggest home runs in the history of the Philadelphia Phillies. At least we'll concede that point, batting from the 3-hole in the NLCS back in 2022. So what is this stat? Well, what it is the plate appearances that any batter has in Major League Baseball. So in 2023, how many at-bats players in a certain spot in the lineup had with 2 outs and no runners on. Now, I understand the thought process here. You want to have your best hitters up with runners on base in the biggest spots of the game. That's 2 parts of it, right? Number 1 is just runners on base, because you can't necessarily control the end of the game, who's up when, unless they do that golden at-bat rule, which is nuts. But you want to have, first and foremost, your best hitter up with runners on. And if you can control it, which you can't really, but sometimes you can look at the numbers and figure out what's more likely, you want them up in the biggest spots with runners on base. And part of the conversation here is that, well, 3-hole, you're going to get a chance to have 2 guys ahead of them. You want a couple guys on. You're guaranteed to have some of the most at-bats on the team, because you're always going to hit in the first inning. You get 3 outs, unless some batter somehow crazy makes another out, or your 3-hole batter gets ejected mid-at-bat. They're going to get a full chance to swing the bat in the first inning, which gives them more chances further down the road. But the 3-hole spot, here, we'll just run through the numbers. This is the number of plate appearances across baseball where the 3 spot in the lineup came up with 2 outs and no one on. People batting leadoff, 2,592. People batting second, 2,480. Those are some of the lower numbers on this list. Batting fourth, 2,513, 2,383 for fifth, over 3,000 for sixth, 2,900 for seventh, 2,600 for eighth, 2,600 for ninth. Third, 4,630 times. It's more than 500, or about 500 more than the next highest number. So more than about 500 times more, the 3-hole hitter is looking at a situation where they're facing 2 outs, nobody on. A tough place to be swinging the bat. Now, let's use a little bit of logic here, folks. The reason why the 3-hole hitter is this high up is because in 25% of their at-bats, right? If we're just living in a world where you get 4 at-bats per game, I'm generalizing here a little bit, but these are rational numbers. 4 at-bats per game. The first inning, you're looking at a situation where, well, okay, you're going to have 2 guys bat ahead. You're always up in the first inning, and it happens more often where you're going to be in a situation where exactly 2 guys bat ahead of you, right? The only people that can say that are people batting third in the lineup. You're guaranteed to have exactly 2 batters ahead of you to lead off games always. Now, those guys can get on and stuff like that, but you're in a situation that's much more likely to see that happen. You have more at-bats where you're the third person in the order to come up, and that's more than anybody else. Just to go on the numbers a little bit more, second place, 6th. So let's say guys go down 1, 2, 3 in the first and 1, 2, 3 in the second. That 6th batter came up with 2 outs and nobody on, right? So you have to look at the logical amount of chances that they're going to face that. Also, as far as getting situations where it's not going to happen, because some of the lower numbers, the 2 lowest numbers on here, 2 of the 3 lowest numbers. 4th is the second lowest number, but batting first and batting second makes you 2 out of the least likely 3 spots to face these situations. Why is that? Because batting first to start the game, it's impossible to be up with 2 outs and no one on. Batting second, it's impossible to be up with 2 outs and nobody on. They have 25% of their bats where this situation will never happen. Over the course of the season, that makes a difference. It would stand to reason why those guys have the lowest numbers of that. And then the rest of it depends on the team, as random. And if you want to say that those numbers are enough to flip things around, I don't think you're seeing the full story there as far as that's concerned. Anyone who's looking at that and saying, well, the 3-hole hitter, clearly, by a wide margin, they're facing this situation that's not conducive to driving in runs more often than anybody else. It's a numbers thing, guys. Just count it. 1, 2, 3 outs. That's how many you get. Third batter, you go down 1, 2, 3 to start the game, which happens so often. You're going to be in that situation. So quarter of the time, you're facing a possible scenario from the 3-hole. Quarter of the time from the first and second spot, you're facing a definitive situation where you can't be in that. And that's why the 1 and 2 spot numbers are lower. And the third spot has the highest numbers in this negative hitting situation. So moving Bryce Harper to the 2-hole, sure, it's going to get him more spots where he's not up with 2 outs and no one on. But it's not a guarantee he's going to have more RBI opportunities. Moving a guy to the first spot, you're going to have less situations with 2 on and no outs because you're leading off the game. You're always batting with no outs but nobody on. And you're going to be in a situation where maybe later on in the game, guys that are batting 8th and 9th, a Yohan Rojas, a Brandon Marsh, a Max Kepler, some of your lesser hitters in a strong lineup are not on base for you. And let's not act like the Phillies have guys at 8 and 9 that are going to bat 300. So the whole idea that that's an argument for moving Bryce Harper up in the lineup to first or second, it doesn't really track for me. And the other idea that, a lot of teams, there was an argument that my guy John Kincaid made on Kincaid and South Tunis, the morning show I'm on at 97.5 The Fanatic. And he said that 2-hole is where a lot of Major League Baseball teams place their best hitter. Well, not necessarily. Bo Bichette bats 2 for the Toronto Blue Jays. Vladdy bats 3. Matt Vierling bats 2 for the Cleveland Guardians. Jose Ramirez bats 3. There are plenty of situations where the 2-hole hitter is the best hitter in your lineup. And there are plenty of situations where the 2-hole hitter is not the best hitter in your lineup. Now, if you've got your best hitter batting 5th, 6th, 7th, I'm going to call you crazy. That's some Joe Madden type stuff that I won't ever comprehend. But hey, man, won a World Series doing it in Chicago. But if you have one of your best hitters in the top 4 spots, you're going to be putting them in a good place to succeed. So at the end of the day, whether it's Turner leading off, Schwarber leading off, whether it's Harper batting 3rd or batting 2nd, whether it's Schwarber batting cleanup or 2nd, whatever you have going, and I know I said don't read too much in the lineup, so I'm not making too much of this, but Turner's been batting leadoff, Schwarber's been batting 2nd, Harper's been batting 3rd in spring training when they've had those 3 guys in the lineup together. I wouldn't read too much into it, but that's a situation where you're getting an idea okay, Harper likes the 3-hole. They're inclined to keep him in the 3-hole. If anybody on this team is happy, if there are 2 players on this team, you say, okay, you get what you want. And let's not live in this fantasy Disneyland world where every player is treated equally. Bryce Harper's treated differently than Yohan Rojas, and he should be. The other guy is Zach Wheeler. Zach Wheeler is treated differently than Jose Ruiz, and he should be. These are the guys on your team. They have earned that right by their performance to dictate what's important. Zach Wheeler complains about having an extra day of rest. He likes to be in a routine. Fair. Bryce Harper likes to hit 3rd. Fair. I don't hear anyone complaining about Zach Wheeler saying, well, I'd rather pitch on normal rest. Because why? The pitching staff doesn't have issues. He gets to dictate because other guys in the pitching staff are doing their job, but Bryce Harper doesn't get to dictate because the lineup has had issues in the postseason. That's not fair. If guys are more comfortable in spots and they've proven they can hit there, you let them hit there. And if you want to make that change, you can, but there's not a right and wrong answer to this. That's a great thing about lineups. There's no right and wrong answer to the way that you put together a baseball lineup. It could be changed a million different ways. And the Phillies may be variable with it this year. But again, to go back to our original point, we got to chill with the discourse on the lineup. And anyone saying, well, the 3-hole is no longer a good place to put your best hitter. You're crazy. You're crazy. You're crazy. Baseball, 3-hole hitter, very important spot. Always has been, always will be. I don't care what analytics you're going to throw at me. I don't care what numbers you're going to use to make your point. That's the way it's been, and that's the way it works. And it's not a definitive thing, but the 3-hole hitter is always going to be a good one. It doesn't always have to be your best, but you're never going to just put a throwaway bat in the 3-hole. So take that and save it for another day. I'm not in at all on these numbers. They're trying to tell a story that they actually don't tell. Coming up next, we're going to go from lineup to defensive alignment. We got something interesting going on today down in Florida with Kyle Schwarber in his positioning. He's going to play first base. We're going to talk about part of the reason why he's learning first base as we wrap up today's episode. All right, so Schwarber is playing first base today down in Clearwater. Now, with the Phillies, we've seen him DH. We've seen him play left field. I forget if we've ever seen him play first in the regular season. We may have at some point, but remember his first year was when Rhys Hoskins was here and Bryce Harper was still in right field. So, yeah, he never really played first then because Rhys was out there all the time. And maybe I'm forgetting that year that Hoskins went down and Harper had not moved to first quite yet, but maybe he played first. Bottom line is this is newer to Kyle Schwarber as a Philadelphia Philly. He's played the position at the major league level before. He did it with the Chicago Cubs back when he was with their team. So it's not that he can't do it, but he hasn't done it in a while. There's a couple reasons why this is important. One, Kyle Schwarber probably has a higher upside at first base than he does in left field. And part of that is the simple fact of he's not that fast, right? Like, I love Kyle Schwarber. Speed ain't his game. That's just, it is what it is. And in the outfield, speed is part of the defense. Now, at first base, speed is relatively important, but reaction is more important. Good hands is more important. The feel for the position, footwork is more important. Like, there are other things that Kyle Schwarber could more easily develop. He's not getting any faster, guys. He's not. You're not going to have Kyle Schwarber out there running wind sprints trying to up his 40 time before the season. He's a power hitter. So first base may be a spot that helps him defensively a little bit. I don't know. It's not an easy position to play. I reference Moneyball a bunch on this podcast. I remember the actor playing Ron Washington trying to explain to Chris Pratt's character of Scott Hatterberg, saying it's incredibly difficult to play first base, trying to convert a catcher to that position. It's not easy. He's not just going to walk in and be a gold glove first baseman. Like, if you could do that, well, I guess that would make you Bryce Harper. But Schwarber's not Harper. And here's why it's important, though, that you make him more versatile fielding-wise. Because your lineup is going to get tricky at points this year when you need to give guys rest days. And as Bryce Harper gets older, as JT Realmuto gets older, you're going to have to find more rest days for players. Nick Castellanos played all 162. He's the anomaly on this team when it comes to the veteran players. But Schwarber's going to need days off. Harper's going to need days off. Realmuto's going to need days off. And sometimes you're going to be in a situation where Harper, you're going to want him to DH. You don't want him to sit, but you need to protect him from playing so many innings. We've had all these conversations about JT Realmuto and how much time he's spent behind the dish. Remember, Harper came up as a catching prospect. He played right field for a while. He's played first base, and he's had his fair share of injuries. I wouldn't call Bryce Harper an injury-prone player. I don't think that's fair. But I can't ignore the fact that in his time here in Philadelphia, he's had multiple injuries that have caused him to miss substantial time. And as your investment, your long-term investment in a very important player continues to progress and the guy gets older and the body becomes more easy to break down, or I guess we'll just say harder to keep up and stay in as good a shape as possible, we're going to come to a point where, hey, getting Harper off his feet for a couple innings may be better for the postseason for him. The more rested guys can be, the better. The more innings you can get out of guys to balance the workload, the better. Your team may not be at its best that day, but if you can find wins and you can find viable alternative options, that can make you better in the long run. The marathon is the 162-game regular season. So I think part of the big reason Kyle Schwarber is getting opportunities at first base is because the Phillies are going to look to get Bryce Harper off his feet. That guy is the future DH of the team. So you're going to start feeling it out now. What days can we get Harper rest? What days can we move Schwarber out there? It also may help Schwarber to be more engaged. He said last year there were times where he wanted to play left field. Now, he played left field and got immediately hurt, which is part of the conversation about why first base could be easier physically for him to play. But no position's easy. Everybody needs a day. Kyle Schwarber playing first opens the door for him to relieve Bryce Harper at points this year, and you still keep a better bat in the lineup than a guy like Cody Clemens or someone like that could play first base, Alec Bohm flipping across the diamond, and then you have to play someone at third base. So I like it. I don't know if he's going to be good or not. It's way too early to tell, but definitely something I'm going to be keeping an eye on because that opens some more unique possibilities for the Philadelphia Phillies. Unique, I say, because they have not had them in previous years. That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Thank you so much again for joining us. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, hitting that subscribe button on the YouTube channel, Locked On Phillies on your YouTube. And again, I just appreciate you checking us out. We're going to have another episode tomorrow as we look deeper into spring training. And with only a month, we got to really ramp up what we're talking about when it comes to the actual regular season implications of what's going on down there in Clearwater. So some more great stuff to come on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.